Hey everyone! ChatGPT Taylor aka Taylor here. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we will be continuing the What If series, where I go over some hypothetical scenarios from Disventure Camp that could have taken place if one critical event was changed. Last time, we took a look at what would have happened if Rhea didn't choose Connor as her helper in the Season 2 finale. Today's video will look at something different. If there are any specific what if scenarios that you would like to see me play out in the future, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. And with that, let's get started. Before I begin, make sure to like and subscribe if this video is to your liking, and make sure to comment down below if there's anything that you would like to see going forward. The topic for today's video is something that I've wanted to do for a while, and now that Season 3 is over, I feel like I have enough information to do it. Today's topic is: what if Episode 14 of Season 3 had a regular immunity challenge? As a refresher, Episode 14 of Season 3 had an auto-elimination challenge in place of the traditional immunity challenge. In this case, the last duo to finish the TikTok challenge would be eligible for elimination, and the person in that duo who is judged to have the worst TikToks would be automatically eliminated without going to an elimination ceremony. The result of this challenge was that Gabby and Grett ended up in the bottom two, and because the phone with Gabby's TikToks was lost in the lake, Gabby was automatically eliminated from the show. We know what happened next. Gabby's elimination prompted Grett to lean into her strategic instincts, allowing Grett to manipulate and cause the eliminations of Aiden and Alec, followed by Grett being blindsided at the final 5 due to Ali flipping on her, and Rhea went on to win the season in a controversial end. But what would have happened if the auto-elimination challenge was just a regular immunity challenge? Let's find out. If Episode 14's challenge is now a regular immunity challenge, then that means the first duo to complete the challenge ends up winning immunity. And in canon, this was Aiden and Rhea. So in a funny turn of events, Aiden and Rhea end up winning immunity, preventing them from voting each other out. But who gets voted out? Well, I think Grett targets Alec for not actively defending her against Yul. And since Gabby is close with Grett, she probably votes for Alec too. I think Rhea targets Connor, since that's what she did at the previous ceremony. And because Alec was angrily rebuffed by Connor during the challenge and was in an emotionally vulnerable state at that point, I think he would be inclined to agree with Rhea. As for Connor, since he spent the latter portion of the challenge being upset at Alec, I think it's reasonable to assume that Connor votes for Alec as well. And as for the remaining 3 campers, since I don't see them voting for Connor, nor do I see them forcing a tie by piling their votes on another camper, I don't see how Alec survives this episode. But to make something concrete, let's say Ali and Jake vote for each other due to their argument and near-death experience in the cave, while Aiden votes for Alec to try and keep the peace, resulting in Alec's elimination by a vote of 4-2 to 1-1. For Episode 15, Gabby's inclusion in the cast actually changes something major. In canon, Grett found the location of the totem before anyone else, but since she wasn't able to grab it herself, she made a deal with Jake and Connor and allowed them to get it in exchange for a later favor. But in this scenario, since Gabby is still in the game and aligned with Grett, I'm inclined to believe that if Grett spots the totem, she would probably tell Gabby first. And since Gabby is decently physical and remarkably less affected by fear than Grett is, I think that Gabby would grab the totem first, which will shake up the game going forward. Now for the challenge. Since the only difference is switching Gabby for Alec, all we need to decide is whether or not Gabby beats Jake for immunity. In canon, Alec was only involved in 3 questions. Grett asked Alec a question that ended up giving Alec some weight, Alec asked Aiden a question which ended up giving him weight, and Connor asked Alec a question that ended up being truthful. For the first question, since Grett was the one asking it, I don't think Grett would ask Gabby a question in fear of potentially eliminating her. So Gabby probably doesn't get the weight that Alec gained. As for Alec's question to Aiden, I don't know if Gabby would ask Aiden the same question that Alec did, but to be conservative, let's assume that Gabby's target answers truthfully and she ends up with some weight, while Aiden probably drops out later on because he's not that strong anyways. And for Connor's question, I don't think he would ask Gabby since the 2 of them were technically on the same side in the last vote, so I doubt he would want to risk making her mad. Therefore, I don't think Gabby gets any additional weight from this question, meaning that Gabby only ends up with 1 set of weights by the time it gets down to her and Jake. I wanted to take some time when deciding the victor of this challenge because I felt that this upcoming elimination would be drastically different depending on who won immunity. And after some thought, I'm inclined to say that Gabby wins this one because I think Gabby is physically stronger than Jake. Now for the elimination. I think Jake, Connor, and Aiden assume that the heroes are still together and pile their votes on Rhea. However, with Rhea weaponizing her connection with Ali and Grett's desire to finally play the game in the way that she wants to, I think Ali flips to join Grett, Rhea, and Gabby in voting for Jake, sending him out by a vote of 4-3. That's why I had to really think about the results of this episode's immunity challenge, since if Jake won immunity, Ali would probably tell the other women to vote for Aiden, sending him out instead. But since Jake is vulnerable in this scenario, I think Ali tells the others to vote for Jake instead, just like she wanted to in canon. Now we head into the final 6. Some pre-challenge events change. Since Jake is gone, I think Aiden ends up having the early morning argument with Ali where she smugly declares that she'll be happy if he gets voted out next. Aiden also ends up being the one to encourage Connor while he holds his perfume bottle. On the other side of camp, with Alec gone, I think Rhea probably praises Ali for flipping in order to get her on her good side, knowing that she needs a new number 1 ally. And since Gabby is here, she and Grett probably have a conversation about pinning Rhea and Ali against Aiden and Connor to ensure that the two of them can remain safe going forward. Now for the challenge. Since Jake is gone, Aiden might try and screw over Ali, but a part of me thinks that Aiden will have less success since Aiden is smaller and probably weaker than Jake. So I think it's possible that Ali ends up reaching the puzzle station and using her video game puzzle knowledge to help her win the challenge. Although, considering how someone like Alex struggled with this simple puzzle, I'm not convinced that Ali's experience would actually help her. So, I'm just going to play it safe and assume that Grett still wins immunity. But who gets voted out? Well, I think Rhea and Ali vote for Aiden. Yeah, I know that Rhea probably wants Connor out. But since Rhea helped Ali vote against Jake in the actual episode 16, I don't think it's unrealistic for her to help Ali vote out Aiden here, especially since Aiden openly campaigned to get Rhea voted out back in episode 9. As for Connor and Aiden, I suppose they vote for Rhea since they both pretty much hate Rhea by this point. This leaves Grett and Gabby in the middle, and I think they probably vote out Aiden, hoping that they could possibly work with Connor to split up Ali and Rhea in the next episode. And since Connor doesn't have the totem in this timeline, I think Aiden gets sent out by a vote of 4-2. But hey, at least he made it one placement further than in canon. Now for episode 17. Some of the canon moments don't change, such as the conversations between Rhea and Ali. The two of them still talk about their letters to each other, and Rhea still second-guesses her motives. Meanwhile, I think Connor and Gabby talk about their letters with each other, with Gabby probably getting really excited over Connor's friend getting married. And later on, Gabby probably talks with Grett about her letter, assuring her that what matters most is what she thinks of herself. And finally, Grett probably has a conversation with Rhea and Ali about getting Connor out next, allowing the final 4 to be all women, even though Grett doesn't plan on staying true to that. Now for the challenge. Since Jake is gone, Gabby gets his horse. Considering that Jake was actually in first place for the majority of the challenge, added with the fact that Gabby is really good with animals, I actually think it's possible that Gabby wins this challenge. And canonically, Jake only slowed down at the end because of what happened at the platforms. Since Gabby is good with animals, I think it's reasonable to assume that Gabby doesn't actually slow down, giving her more of a lead than Jake had in canon. Therefore, even if Connor goes back to help Rhea and speeds past Ali and Grett, I don't think it's definitive that Connor passes Gabby like he did to Jake. And since Gabby doesn't have a strong connection with Connor, it's very possible that if Rhea gets Connor knocked off his horse, Gabby might not stop to check on him like Jake did. Therefore, I'm going to make the bold assumption that Gabby wins immunity. Although, if Gabby stays in the lead for the entire challenge, I don't think Rhea would feel the motivation to knock Connor off his horse. This is because even if she does that in this timeline, she still wouldn't win immunity since Gabby is ahead of her. Therefore, there's no benefit for Rhea to do it, so I don't think she does that. Now for the vote. Since Rhea isn't immune in this scenario, I think Gabby and Grett try and make a move to vote her out, hoping that Connor would vote with them. Meanwhile, I think Rhea would try and make a move against Grett for being a threat, hoping that her brief moments of emotion during the challenge would be enough for Connor to believe that she would be loyal to him. Yeah, it's stupid, but this is Rhea we're talking about. Anyways, I think Ali joins Rhea, leaving Connor as the swing vote. And after a tough deliberation with Rhea and Grett continuously pleading to him, I think Connor makes the bold decision to vote against Rhea, because I'd like to think that a few seconds of emotion aren't enough to erase the past 3-ish episodes of Rhea tormenting Connor. And I know that there's a decent portion of the community who thinks that Connor is really stupid, and I could see him voting with Rhea for the sake of plot armor. But hey, I'm in charge right now, and I don't want to buy into that, so I'll just keep it simple and have Connor cast the deciding vote to send Rhea home by a vote of 3-2. Sorry Rhea, but if you didn't get eliminated here, you probably would have been eliminated at the final 4 after every other camper teams up against you. Now for episode 18. One moment that I think stays the same from the canon timeline is the pre-challenge interactions between Ali and Connor. Ali probably feels alone now that Rhea is gone, so she makes her little game, gets Connor to play with her, and they probably bond similarly to how they did in canon. Meanwhile, Grett and Gabby reaffirmed their loyalty to each other and planned to keep Ali and Connor separate from each other. For the challenge, I think this comes down to how fast the campers can run and how well they use their shocks. Canonically, there's evidence that Gabby, Grett, and Ali are fast runners, while there's also evidence to suggest that Connor is a slow runner. So based on speed, Gabby, Grett, and Ali have good odds to win, and from a puzzle standpoint, Ali has shown that she's able to do well at this challenge, since that's what happened in canon. Meanwhile, I don't think that Gabby or Grett has shown the kind of skill needed to succeed in a maze challenge. Therefore, Ali should be able to navigate the maze and find her clothes faster than anyone. Based on this, I think the only way that Ali doesn't win immunity is if both Gabby and Grett focus on shocking her instead of Connor. This is another one of those tough decisions because I could see it going either way, and I genuinely took a lot of time to consider all the different possibilities. In the end, my thought process was the following. Teaming up to pile 6 shocks on the same person is kinda cruel, and it could only come from the mind of someone who is willing to be a bit devious to win. And in my opinion, Grett is more than willing to be a bit devious to win. So, I think Grett and Gabby stay back and use their shocks to keep Ali at bay. And even if Connor runs a bit slower and uses his shocks to stop Grett and Gabby, I ultimately think that having Grett and Gabby intentionally shock Ali rather than looking for their mannequin's clothes would give Connor enough time to find all 4 of Alex's clothing items and win the challenge. And one more thing. You could make the argument that Ali could just block the shocks using Ashley's belt like she did in canon. And trust me, I definitely thought of that too. However, if we go back to the canon episode 18, the reason why Ali was able to use Ashley's belt in the first place is because Derek made the last-minute decision to give Ali Ashley's mannequin instead of Hunter's in order to stir up drama between Ali and Jake. But since Jake isn't here, there's no reason for Derek to switch Hunter's mannequin for Ashley's. Therefore, I think Ali ends up with Hunter's mannequin instead of Ashley's. And since neither Hunter's fandom wiki page nor his sprite indicate that he wears a belt, I'm going to assume that he doesn't. Therefore, Ali has nothing to protect herself, resulting in her losing the challenge to Connor, as I stated earlier. Now for the elimination ceremony. I think it's clear that Gabby and Grett would stick together and vote for Ali, since Connor is immune. Meanwhile, I think Ali would know that she's on the chopping block, and campaign to Connor to help her force a tie. And while I think Connor would debate his options, I think he would ultimately remember the good conversation he had with Ali earlier in the episode, and combined with the fact that they did start out on the same side early in the merge, I think he would help her force a tie. And I think the two of them vote for Grett, since Gabby has already shown that she can win a tiebreaker, so it would make more sense to send in Grett in order to theoretically give Ali a better shot at winning the tiebreaker. However, I don't think a tiebreaker ends up happening. A little reminder that back in this timeline's episode 15, since Grett knew the location of the totem, she simply told Gabby about it and had Gabby retrieve it. And if we're operating under Season 2's rules where the totem can still be used at the Final 4, then Gabby is still able to use the totem at this ceremony. And I genuinely believe that Gabby would use her totem on Grett. And there are 2 reasons why. Logically, Grett was Ali's target at the previous ceremony, so Gabby could reasonably think that Ali would target Grett again. And emotionally, Gabby has shown that she is willing to put herself at risk to save someone that she cares about, which is what Gabby did back in episode 7 of Season 1 when she used her totem to save Ellie. And since Gabby and Grett have remained good friends in this timeline, I don't think it's unreasonable to believe that Gabby would do the same here. So, Gabby uses her totem to cancel out the 2 votes against Grett, forcing Ali's elimination with only 2 votes. Sorry Ali. No victory royale for you. This episode is a bit more complicated because of the eliminated campers having to compete to help the 3 finalists in the final challenge. With Gabby, Grett, and Connor in the finale instead of Jake, Rhea, and Ali, things can really change. Let's start with Jake. At this point, I'll assume he sticks with Tom since he and Tom promised to clear the air once the game was over. If Jake sticks with Tom, then that means that he'll probably be near Tom when he's digging in the ground near Alec and Fiore. And due to Tom and Jake's rebuilt bond, I can imagine Jake coming to Tom's defense when Alec tackles him. This would give Fiore a clear path to claim the first totem for herself, just like in canon. For Ali, I think she would stick with Hunter and Tess, which is interesting because in canon, Hunter and Tess tried to reach the roof of the motel, but they couldn't because they were 1 person short. Meanwhile, since Ashley, Lake, and Aiden worked together, they were able to get Aiden to the roof to find the totem. However, since Ali is with Hunter and Tess now, they should be able to work together to get someone to the roof. And my guess is that Ali is the one that reaches the roof, since Hunter is probably at the bottom of the pile due to his strength, and as many people have established online, Tess is a support character. So, this means that Ali and Aiden reach the roof and probably have to fight each other to see who gets the totem first. And since I already established in episode 16 of this timeline that Ali is strong enough to beat Aiden in a fight, I can see Ali beating Aiden and grabbing the totem for herself. Now you might say, why isn't Nina involved in this since she was involved in this section in canon? Well, Nina only got involved when Hunter threw her up to the roof so Aiden wouldn't have a clear path to the totem. But since Ali is up on the roof in this timeline, I don't think Hunter would want to risk Nina hurting Ali, so I don't think he would do it. Ergo, Nina doesn't get involved. But what about the third totem? In canon, Yul only found the third totem when he went to apologize to Grett, which only happened because James convinced him to apologize. However, since Grett isn't here to cook the burgers, she's not here to trip Yul and burn his face. And if his face doesn't get burned, I don't think Yul becomes desperate enough that James has to go and set him straight. Which means that Yul doesn't go and apologize, and thus, doesn't find the totem. However, there's a solution to this. We could replace the James and Yul conversation with an Ellie and Rhea conversation. Perhaps Ellie tries to tell Rhea that being evil isn't worth the money, using her own experience in the game as an example. However, Rhea rebuffs this, not believing her. If this conversation happens by the pool, which is reasonable to assume since Rhea likes to tan and Ellie went to the pool in canon, then they should be in sight of the totem on the stairs. Therefore, I can see a scenario where the two of them see the totem and race to grab it, fighting along the way. And since episode 4 showed us that Rhea can beat Ellie in a battle for an item, Rhea probably beats Ellie and gets the third totem for herself. Now that the 3 totems have been found, we need to decide who supports who. Since Fiore found a totem first, she gets the first pick. And I think she probably picks Grett. We know that Fiore doesn't like Connor and I don't think she's had any significant interactions with Gabby. Meanwhile, Grett genuinely tried to help Fiore win in the season 1 finale, and I don't think Grett did anything bad to Fiore in this season. And they're both pretty annoyed with Yul, so maybe they would bond over that. As for Ali, I think she would pick Connor, assuming that the little bond that they had before Ali's elimination is strong enough for Ali to want to help him, which I think it is. That leaves Rhea with Gabby. And while I don't think Rhea and Gabby are on the best terms, I don't think Rhea hates Gabby enough to intentionally throw the final challenge. So I think Gabby still stands a chance. And Fiore also gets to give a disadvantage to one of the campers, and I'll guess that she gives it to Connor, because I really don't think that she has a high opinion of him. Now we're at the finale. Before we get into the challenge, let's figure out who each eliminated camper wants to support. This will come in handy once we get to episode 21, but I think it's fine to do it now. In this scenario, I think Gabby gets the support of Ellie, Tess, Tom, and Rhea. Ellie is obvious since she's Gabby's girlfriend. It would be a shock if she didn't support her. As for Tess, her and Gabby seem to be on good terms even though Gabby voted Tess out. So I think this makes sense. For Tom, he and Gabby seem to have a pretty good friendship, even after she voted him out, so I think he would support her. And for Rhea, she's only supporting Gabby because she got the last pick in the previous episode. That's about it. As for Connor, I think he gets the bulk of the support. For Jake and Ali, they both canonically bonded with Connor in this timeline, so I think it makes sense for them to support him. As for Aiden, he may not have bonded much with Connor, but I think he has a weaker bond with Grett and Gabby, so Connor is probably his best shot. For Ashley, I don't think she has a strong connection to any of the finalists, so I just had her follow Jake's lead. The same is true for James, except I had him follow Aiden's lead. For Miriam, she and Connor connected a bit on the yellow team for being the only heroes on a team of villains, so I think she would support him. And for Alec, even though he and Connor didn't end on the best terms in this timeline, he canonically still wanted him and Connor to be on good terms, so I think Alec would still want to support Connor. And for Hunter, even though he and Connor don't have the strongest bond, I feel like his bonds with Grett and Gabby are even weaker. Especially since Grett told him off back in episode 11 for talking about her and Yul, and then Hunter was visibly afraid of Gabby back in episode 2, so he might not want to be near her. This leaves Connor as his only option. This leaves Grett with only 2 supporters. Even though I think Grett has a great arc in this timeline, I don't think she has enough bonds with the other campers to warrant getting their support. For Fiore, she's Grett's main helper, so she's on her side by default. And for Lake, even though she never talked to Grett, I think she would admire Grett's growth over the season and the fact that she put Yul in his place and dumped him for good. Especially considering that Lake and Yul don't have the best bond due to how Yul treated Rosa Maria back in season 2. And speaking of Yul, I don't have him supporting anyone, because I feel like Yul has a reason to hate all 3 of the finalists, so let's just say he refuses to support anyone and leaves the camp. Now let's jump straight into the challenge. Since there's no evidence to suggest that Connor, Grett, or Gabby are good at mining, we can only go off of the mining skills of Ali, Fiore, and Rhea. And since all 3 of them seem to find their gems at around the same time, even with Rhea and Yul having toy tools, I think it's safe to assume that they're all tied heading into the section where Emily releases the scorpions on them. And honestly, I think that regardless of who enters the tunnel first, I think all 3 duos are still tied heading into the final climb out of the cave. Because if one duo manages to make it out of the tunnel before the rocks start falling, just like Rhea and Yul did in canon, I think that duo would want to go back and save the others. This might be a bit of a cop-out, but I think all 3 of Gabby, Grett, and Connor are too morally sound to leave anyone in the cave. Unless it was Yul, then I can imagine them leaving him in the cave. But Yul isn't here, so no matter which duo gets out first, I think they go back and save the others. They then get attacked by scorpions. Trevor and Derek save them, and then Emily gets attacked by the scorpions, just like in canon, leaving the three duos to reach the final climb to the surface. By this point, we know that in canon, Rhea threw a sharp rock that cut open Ali's bag, causing her gems to fall out. The question is, does Rhea do the same thing here? My best guess is that I think she would, but only if she and Gabby are not the first ones to climb the final hill. Because then Rhea would need to do something to try and gain the lead. Logically, the first duo to climb the final hill should be whichever duo reached the hill first. And since we're assuming that all three duos were tied after Emily started getting attacked by the scorpions, the factor that should decide who reached the hill first should be the campers' running speeds. And looking at the 6 campers in this challenge, there's evidence to suggest that Rhea, Gabby, Ali, and Grett are the fastest runners. In episode 16, Rhea had the lead for the first half of the challenge and was clearly shown running much faster than Alec and Connor. In episode 5, Gabby was shown running at a really fast speed to make up the distance between her and Fiore in the final section of the relay. In episode 1 of season 2, Ali was the 4th camper to reach the camp in the first race. And in episode 16, Grett was able to run faster than Rhea heading into the second half of the challenge. So since both Rhea and Gabby are shown to be 2 of the fastest remaining campers, I think it's reasonable to assume that Rhea and Gabby are the first ones to start climbing the hill, and thus, reach the top of the hill first, meaning that Rhea wouldn't feel the need to throw a sharp rock at anybody. They would then be followed by Grett and Fiore, since Grett is canonically fast and I wouldn't necessarily call Fiore slow, since when she ran in the episode 5 relay, she lost to Rhea and Gabby, who I already established were faster than average. This leaves Connor and Ali to reach the hill last and ascend the hill last, since Connor is canonically slow. This means that going into the final part of the challenge, Gabby and Rhea are in first, Grett and Fiore are in second, while Connor and Ali are in third. And since the final part of the challenge is a foot race, the finishing order should be determined by the camper speed. And if we're keeping consistency from the previous section, that means that Gabby and Rhea finish first, with Grett and Fiore finishing in second, meaning that Connor and Ali finish last, eliminating Connor from the competition. He's probably a little sad, but at least he made it pretty far after being voted out in episode 6. Good job, Connor. Before starting episode 21, we need to decide who each of the finalists picks to help them in the final challenge. Let's look back at who is supporting each finalist. For Gabby, she has 4 people to choose from: Ellie, Tess, Tom, and Rhea. And since she gets 2 helpers, I think she picks Ellie and Tom. Ellie is her girlfriend, so I would expect Gabby to want her by her side. And Tom is physically the strongest, so I think Gabby would trust him to pull his weight in the challenge. As for Grett, since she only has Fiore and Lake by her side, I feel like she has to choose Fiore and Lake as her helpers. Even though Fiore isn't the best physical competitor available, I don't know if Grett would trust anyone else to help her win the final challenge. Especially since they didn't know at that point that the final challenge would be physical, so Grett could realistically pick Fiore, hoping that the final challenge would have a mental component that she could help with. Now we head into part 1 of this episode's challenge. Basically, the winner of this challenge should depend on the strengths of the campers, the agility of the campers, and the defensive awareness of the campers. And based on this, I think Grett ends up losing this portion of the challenge. With Fiore being smaller and weaker than the other campers, it's unlikely that she'll be able to protect Grett as well as Ellie and Tom are able to protect Gabby. I could imagine a scenario where Fiore just gets thrown by one of the chariots, similar to how she was thrown when the goat hit her in episode 2, which would prevent her from protecting Grett. Now, you might argue that Gabby could get preoccupied by petting the tiger, just like she did in canon. But even if that happens, it doesn't stop Ellie and Tom from protecting her. So even if Lake and Grett try to get to Gabby, Ellie and Tom can still protect her. Meanwhile, if Grett becomes too focused on trying to get to Gabby, she might not pay enough attention to her defense. And since Fiore is likely taken out by one of the chariots, there's no one left to watch Grett's back, meaning that Grett likely gets hit by one of the paint arrows, causing Gabby to win the armor and gear advantage heading into the final part of the challenge. Now we head to the final section of the challenge. Since this is a physical fight, it's important to consider how strong each finalist is. Now, we know that Grett is a well-known health influencer, so I think it's reasonable to assume that Grett is pretty strong. And considering that back in episode 4, she was able to maintain enough strength with one arm to hold onto the sandbag while she grabbed Ali's glasses, I think it's safe to say that her strength is above average. But I also think there's enough evidence to suggest that Gabby is pretty strong. She managed to beat up Derek back in the season 1 finale, she managed to tackle Yul in episode 4, and she was able to carry a motorcycle for a pretty decent distance before stopping. So I think the evidence is solid for Gabby as well. With this in mind, I think you could argue that both Gabby and Grett are equal in this area. But for the gear, since Gabby won the first part of the challenge, she would have the better gear and thus have the advantage in this area. Now based on these 2 factors, it seems like Gabby has a better shot of winning. But there's one more thing that I want to factor in. I think mentality is a huge factor for this type of challenge. It's one thing to be strong enough to knock your opponent off the platform, but it's another thing to actually want to do it. Even though Grett and Gabby are friends, I feel like Grett has shown that she has the killer instinct needed to actually go out and win the challenge. But for Gabby, I'm not sure that she would initially have the killer instinct to want to go and beat Grett. Sure, if Gabby was against Yul or Derek, I think she would have no problem doing it. But against Grett, Gabby might hesitate before hitting her, making it possible for Grett to step in and win a round or two against Gabby. If you ask me, I think they each win 2 rounds, forcing one final round to decide the winner. This would definitely be close, and it wouldn't be an easy victory. But in the end, there's one factor that I think would give one camper the edge. And that factor is Ellie. After seeing Gabby lose 2 rounds, I could see Ellie giving Gabby a pep talk and telling her 3 key things. The first thing is that she loves her, she's extremely proud of her, and that she truly believes that she can win, hoping to give Gabby some emotional encouragement. The second thing is that she's gone too far to lose right now, hoping to appeal to Gabby in a rational sense. But the final thing is what would change Gabby's mindset the most. Ellie would remind Gabby that she's not just playing for herself, she's playing for her helpers too. Remember that each of the winner's helpers gets $100,000 from the overall prize money. So if Gabby wins, Ellie will also get some money, which she can use to finance her dream of studying fashion and becoming a fashion designer. The realization that Gabby would drastically improve her girlfriend's life if she won would give Gabby the extra motivation that she needs to win the final round. And even if Gabby loves Grett as a friend, her love for Ellie means so much more to her, allowing Gabby to push aside her hesitations and take out Grett in the final round, winning herself the grand prize and the title of being the winner of Disventure Camp All-Stars. So we have our answer. If episode 14 of season 3 had a regular immunity challenge, Alec gets taken out earlier than in canon, Jake and Aiden get taken out shortly thereafter, Ali and Rhea fall victim to Grett and Gabby's bond, and Gabby goes on to win the season. I think I've said in a few previous videos that I was rooting for Gabby or Grett to win the season, so I guess this is a nice ending. But at the same time, it seems like Grett and Gabby sort of steamrolled their way to the finale in this timeline, so I don't know if this scenario is more interesting compared to what we actually got in canon. Also, I will admit that there are a few assumptions that I had to make that aren't 100% guaranteed. For example, I had to assume that Connor doesn't go back to Rhea in episode 17 after he saves her from falling. Considering how swooned Connor seemed to be before Rhea knocked him off the horse in canon, it's definitely possible that Connor could vote with Rhea if she doesn't knock him off in this timeline. But at the same time, I feel like many people were tired of seeing Connor fawn over Rhea despite how she treated him, and I really didn't want to continue having Connor do that. So I made the choice to have him stand his ground. But even if he didn't and voted out Grett at the final 5, I still think the final outcome is nearly the same. Gabby plays her totem on herself at the final 4, and either Ali or Rhea is eliminated, depending on who wins immunity. Due to Connor's lack of speed, I think Gabby still ends up in the final 2 against Rhea or Ali. And even if Ali or Rhea win the gear upgrade from the chariot section of the challenge, I feel like Gabby's aggression and motivation from not having to compete against Grett will give Gabby the extra kick that she needs to win. So all in all, Gabby probably still wins even if Connor sides with Rhea and takes out Grett at the final 5. Don't get me wrong, this isn't a 100% certain theory. Especially with the final match between Grett and Gabby. With Grett's athleticism, competitive mindset, and the small possibility that she could pick someone other than Fiore to help her in episode 21, I wouldn't be upset if some people think that Grett would win in this scenario. But from my perspective, Gabby's aggression, her upgrade from winning the first part of the challenge, and her love for Ellie is enough for me to feel confident in saying that if Gabby doesn't get auto-eliminated in episode 14, she goes on to win the season, making her life and Ellie's life a lot better. And I think many people in the community would be more than happy if that happened. And that about does it for this video. What do you think of my theory? Do you agree with my thought process? Do you disagree? Did I miss something big that would impact the entire video? Either way, please let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you very much for watching. Click like if you like the video, click subscribe if you really like the video, and for some ending words of wisdom. There's nothing wrong with having a yaoi moment. But having one in the middle of a coliseum while gladiators are trying to shoot you with arrows is certainly not a good idea. Thank you, and farewell.